February marks a special month for me because it's 2 years of our family no longer being low income. Hi, I'm Jasmine, an accredited financial counselor, and I love talking about money through a shame-free lens. So let's talk about my story and what moving from financial instability towards stability has looked like for us. Now, let me just say this. I have experienced financial instability for most of my adulthood. So to be here 2 years later is super impactful for me. I've had to do so much healing work to get to where I am today. So I'm not going to go all the way back to the beginning of my story. I'm going to go back to 2020. In 2020, my husband and I were both full-time self-employed individuals doing creativity and doing amazing. And then 2020 happens where we lose 100% of our income and we have like an oh shoot moment. You see, I've been a professional photographer for over 20 years, and in an instant, I saw my entire industry shut down. Weddings, events, portraits, and more. My husband travels for music and nobody was traveling during this time. And so we were like, what are we going to do? Thankfully, as creatives, we have multiple skills that we've learned how to monetize. However, we had to figure out how we were going to pivot. And in that pivoting process, we had purchased a firehouse that we were rehabbing the garage space into a creative studio. We finished this creative studio literally the week that shelter in place took place, and we had no idea that this space would be what would allow for us to re-earn an income. In fact, we were able to triple our income instead of losing income. This was an opportunity for us to build our business reserves, pay ourselves equitably, and even pay off the debt we had incurred to renovate the space. What I didn't foresee happening was that later in 2020, during the COVID pandemic, one of my children would be diagnosed with a chronic illness, a GI disorder. And we had no idea what was about to happen or what we were about to experience. But between the months of December 2020 to July 2021, she was hospitalized 6 times. This deeply impacted the ways that we could work because showing up for our kiddo was really important to us. We had no idea that a health crisis was something that our family would experience, and figuring out how to show up well through that situation and everything that she was experiencing was super important to us. So what did we do? We were still working, but we weren't taking advantage of all the income opportunities because we wanted to focus on our health, which meant that the reserves we had built up were no longer there 6 months to a year later. And we faced the reality of, oh shoot, we're going to have to decrease our income to be able to sustain ourselves. What I'm grateful for was that for the first time ever, we had an emergency fund that we could pull off of. So while we became low income again, we were able to pull from our emergency fund to fill in the deficit of our budget to what we needed to survive. This season was one of the hardest seasons, and I'll never forget connecting with my spiritual director and just telling her that I felt so sad. There was like a level of grief that I didn't know how to communicate. And she told me, Jasmine, it's okay to grieve this. You thought you were finally in the space and place of being financially stable, and you've been kind of yanked back into this feeling of being financially unstable. And so having that language of saying it's okay to grieve what I thought I was going to have gave me the space to realize that it was okay, that what I felt was okay, that my feelings were validated, and more. But here's what I had this time that I didn't have the time before when we lost our home, car, and possessions in 2010. I had the tools and the strategies to help me get through this. I had been doing the healing work for years in partnership with my therapist, that when my mind would say, Jasmine, you are going to lose everything again, I could pause my mind and say, no, we're not. We have an emergency fund. I know how to budget. We are going to get through this hard financial season, and we're going to be able to come on the other side of this. Now, if I'm honest, I thought this financially challenging season was going to last us like 6 months. And what I thought would be 6 months actually turned into almost 2 full years. So between 2022 and 2024 is when we found ourselves being low income again. Those 2 years taught me some of the greatest lessons, both in physical health, but also in financial health. What I learned through physical health is presence is healing, and that no amount of money I have will ever be greater than the physical health of someone that I deeply love and care for. When it came to money, what I learned was that there are endless opportunities to earn an income, and that it was okay for our family to pause, reduce our income as we showed up really well for our newly chronically ill child. I think what comes off as very painful though is that there's this assumption that if you find yourself being low income, it's because of something you did. It's because you don't know how to budget, or it's because you're an overspender. But the reality is that that is true for some, but that is not 100% true for everybody who is low income. I just shared, we became low income because of a health crisis. And we had to do what we had to do to help our family through it while still trying our best to make sure that we were earning an income that could sustain our family. I often wonder what it looks like, how we can better love and support our friends who are in a financially challenging season. What does it look like to show up with empathy? What does it look like to show up in presence? What does it look like to listen well and not fix unless the friend asks for advice and support in that kind of way? And then I wonder what it looks like to use our money, time, and resources to help our friends that we say we are in community with. Okay, so how did we become financially stable? Well, as we were nearing 2024, I said, okay, something needs to change. The fact that we were running out of our emergency fund also impacted this, but I knew that we could no longer sustain this and be okay with living off of the income that we had while trying to fill in the deficit. We had depleted our savings. I'm super grateful that our 6 months emergency fund helped fill in the gap for 2 years. Please hear me say that. But I knew that we couldn't continue moving this way. I knew I needed to increase my income. I knew that we needed to figure out how we could take on the cost of health insurance so that we could be able to get a plan that allows us to go nationally anywhere versus being restricted to our state because of Medicaid. I knew that we needed to be able to double, if not triple, our income. And when I started crunching the numbers, the heart palpitations I experienced and the sense of overwhelm was real. But I knew that I needed to create this plan for our family. And that's what I sought to do. So as we closed out 2023, I said something needs to change. I advocated for a pay raise. If you don't know, I lead a creative arts nonprofit. Although I'm the founder of it, I don't get to determine my salary without the approval of the board. So I advocated for a pay raise, in which of course they approved because they want to see me succeed and thrive in the work that I'm doing. If you're like, wait, back up, girl. How many jobs do you have? Let me clarify. My husband and I have multiple businesses now. We have a creative business where he does music and I do photography. And then I lead a creative arts nonprofit as the executive director. We are the founders of both the nonprofit and the for-profit. My husband does not help with the nonprofit day-to-day work. He is just a huge champion of my dream to do this work. I thought that building this nonprofit would become my end all be all, if I'm honest. I thought it would be the job that would give me the salary, that would give me the benefits, and then that was just not the story. And so I've had to figure out how to bring in additional income through my photography creative business so that it could fill in the gap. So with that being said, I have 2 jobs. I work for my photography creative brand that I get paid through. And then I have a salary that I get paid through my nonprofit. So when I went and advocated for a raise, they gave me the pay raise. And then I crunched the numbers with our business and saw that we could, in fact, give ourselves a raise. We're an S Corp, so we do pay ourselves through payroll. So I gave both of us a raise, and before we knew it, we had doubled our income. But in doubling our income, I knew that was not enough, because doubling our income would mean that we would be able to cover the cost of those items that we were in a deficit for. Increasing our income only allowed for us to be back at base zero. If you haven't heard of the cliff effect, let me share what that is. The cliff effect is for those who are low income. If they experience a pay raise, that pay raise is just enough to make them lose benefits, but not enough to fill in the difference of what those benefits covered. So let's say you're getting $500 for groceries as a family of five and health insurance, and you get a raise of $500, making you lose benefits. That means you still have to fill in the difference of that income for the health insurance, is leaving families in worser financial situations. This is why it's so hard to get off of public benefits, because the gap is so wide that any raise in between the gap will leave you in a worser financial situation. So I knew that I needed to 2.5 triple our income in order to be able to not just be at zero, but get ourselves into a more thriving, equitable living wage budget. How did I determine this number? I used what's called the MIT Living Wage Calculator to help inform how much I should be getting paid, based on how many people are in your home and then how many people work and in the city and state that you live in. So that's how I was able to double my income. I couldn't quite for the first year triple it. That was just too much of a jump. And so I had to figure out how we were going to get beyond baseline zero and increase even maybe just a little bit more to then fill in the gap for premiums, co-pays, deductibles, and all the things. I also knew that I needed to triple my income if I wanted to actually invest for retirement. I needed extra in my budget that I can then allocate into my Roth IRA and being able to max it out. Because at this time I was about to turn 40, I had no retirement plan and needed to figure out how I can start investing for retirement since I didn't start right away in my 20s. We can talk more about what it means to feel financially behind, but I really try not to compare myself to others in their journey. My journey has brought me to where I am today, and I'm truly grateful for it. I think the biggest learning opportunity for me is the consistent mind work I've had to do. There's a level of guilt, if I'm honest, around what it looks like to no longer be low income, to be able to have stability in a way that we haven't had before. It's dang, it's a privilege and it's honor. And I want to make sure that I remember where I've come from and that I continue to lead being in the financial space as someone who is kind to others who are walking through financially challenging seasons. One, because it's my lived experience and I know it, but two, we just need more compassionate financial educators in this space. And it brings me a lot of emotion as I think about it. The guilt. And then there's also the fear of, will I become low income again? When I lead my financial workshops, I always talk about the highs and lows of life, and that there's always going to be seasons when we have surplus, and then there's going to be seasons where we might be in lack. I have to remind myself that financial stability doesn't mean that money is my security, because money is not my security, because I could lose my job at any point, my business could lose its revenue, and I may need to increase my salary at some point. But what I do have to remind myself is that I have the tools, the skills, and the strategy to earn an income, to gain revenue from my business. I have creative skills that I've learned to monetize. And then on the emotional side, I have the skills that tell me not to tie or associate my worth or value to the amount of dollars I have or don't have. So yes, while there is a fear around what it could look like to become low income again, I know that how much money I have does not determine my worth or my value. I also know that I have an emergency fund that I've rebuilt over the last 2 years to be able to sustain us in the event that we go through another financially hard season. We just don't know what could come our way. Another health crisis could come. There could be something that causes one of us to lose our income. And so what does it look like to plan well for something like that happening? Which is why building an emergency fund is so important, so that we could be able to take care of our future selves in the event we do lose our income. So with that being said, it's been 2 years now since I have moved towards being financially stable, and there's a peace in it. There's a grace in it. There's a joy in the fact that we're able to provide our kids a stability, that we're able to do things, right? Well, now we don't have a huge budget since so much of our income goes towards medical expenses, but we have enough. We have enough to live where we want to live. We have enough that allows for us to experience our joys and our values, and we've built our lives shaped off of those things. So here's some encouragement I want to share. One, it is okay. Feel it all. You can grieve it, you can cry it out, you can be angry, you can be frustrated. And then at some point, create a plan. Create a plan for what increasing your income can look like, whether that's finding a new job, whether that's starting a business. But as you're creating the plan, don't allow yourself to limit what could be around what it could look like to actually increase your income and be able to take those next steps. Well, friends, I have said a lot, and I just want to hold space and compassion. So for journaling today, what would it look like to create a plan that allows for you to consider a potential reality of an income loss, where you establish an emergency fund that can cover 3 to 6 months? I also want you to continue noticing and reflecting on how you respond to different financial situations in different seasons. You don't necessarily have to do anything about it other than notice and reflect. How did it make you feel? What emotions came to mind? And if you have the capacity to connect and invite a financial therapist or a therapist into this, then I would highly encourage that as well. If you need resources, I'll supply some in the show notes. But really just continuing to do this internal healing work around what your money mindset is, your money story, and how you can create a plan to move from financial instability to stability is key. And I, as an accredited financial counselor, want to help walk with you in that. I want to help partner with you in that. I want to help in any way that I can. I believe that there are an endless opportunity of ways to generate an income and a revenue, but it takes time. It's not easy, and it's not a quick fix. So continue to do your homework, journal, unpack your money story, start thinking about how you're interacting with money and how that influences your financial decisions. And until next time, peace out.